My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 39 years old, and every dollar that built my $4.2 million estate in Cherry Hills Village, Colorado came from 16 years of relentless work in commercial real estate. I sacrificed vacations, relationships, weekends, and countless sleepless nights to earn the life I have today. No one handed me success. I earned every inch of it. Then one Saturday evening, during a quiet family dinner, my younger sister looked at me and casually said, "Starting tomorrow, Ethan and his parents are moving into this house. If that bothers you, you can leave." I smiled. I said nothing. The next morning, 3 moving trucks stopped outside my front gate. A few hours later, the people inside those trucks were standing in complete panic. But to understand why, you need to know how everything began. 2 years earlier, my father, Richard Donovan, passed away from a sudden heart attack. Losing him shattered our family. My mother, Eleanor, tried to stay strong, but only months later, she was diagnosed with a serious illness that slowly stole her strength. For 3 painful years, I spent my mornings closing multi-million-dollar property deals and my evenings sitting beside her hospital bed, hoping money could somehow buy more time. It couldn't. She passed away only weeks after I finished paying off the mortgage on our dream home. The mansion suddenly felt empty. Every hallway reminded me of someone I had lost. Silence filled every room. Then my younger sister, Madison, asked if she could move in. She said living alone after Mom's death was destroying her emotionally. She cried as she begged for another chance for us to be a family again. I believed her. I never asked for rent. I gave her the largest guest suite and told her this house was her safe place too. For a few weeks, everything felt normal. We cooked together, shared old memories, and slowly brought life back into the quiet mansion. I truly believed we were healing. I had no idea that my kindness wasn't being appreciated. It was being studied. Because only a month after Madison moved in, she introduced me to the man who would quietly turn my own home into a battlefield. And I didn't realize it until it was far too late. Ethan Mercer was 31, sharply dressed, endlessly confident, and unbelievably charming. The first time we met, he arrived carrying an expensive bottle of wine and spoke with the polished confidence of a successful businessman. He claimed he worked as an independent investment consultant, helping wealthy clients grow their fortunes. On the surface, he seemed respectful, intelligent, and ambitious. I wanted to believe Madison had finally found someone who truly cared about her. Within weeks, Ethan became a regular guest. Weekend visits turned into long stays, and long stays quietly became everyday life. At first, I ignored the extra toothbrush in the bathroom and the neatly folded clothes appearing in the guest room. Then I noticed expensive watches spread across my kitchen island, his shoes lined up near the entrance, and his laptop permanently sitting on my dining table. No one had asked my permission. They simply acted as if my home naturally belonged to them. Soon Ethan behaved less like a visitor and more like the owner. He adjusted the thermostat whenever he wanted, invited friends over without mentioning it to me, and filled the garage with sports equipment I had never approved. Whenever I questioned him, he smiled politely and replied, "We're family now, Claire. We shouldn't keep score." Madison always defended him. "You're overthinking everything," she would say. "He's just trying to make the house feel warm." But it wasn't warmth. It was control. One evening, I returned home after closing a major commercial property, deal worth millions of dollars. I expected peace and quiet. Instead, loud music echoed through the living room. Nearly a dozen strangers were laughing, drinking, and taking selfies beside the grand staircase. Crystal glasses from my late mother's collection were scattered across the marble counter, and muddy footprints stretched across the white floors she had loved so much. When I asked who these people were, Ethan casually introduced them as business contacts. Before I could respond, Madison whispered that I was embarrassing everyone by making a scene, so I apologized inside my own house. That night, while cleaning broken glass from the kitchen floor, I finally realized something that made my stomach sink. This wasn't happening by accident. Every small boundary they crossed was carefully calculated. They were testing how much they could take from me before trying to take everything. Over the next 2 months, the atmosphere inside my home changed completely. Every room that once brought me peace now reminded me that I was slowly losing control of the place I had worked 16 years to own. Ethan never paid a single bill, yet he acted as though every decision required his approval. Madison followed his lead without questioning anything, and together they began treating my kindness as weakness. The first serious incident happened on a Monday afternoon. After a long meeting with investors, I returned home expecting to prepare for another closing. Instead, I found 2 contractors carrying furniture out of my private home office. My solid oak desk, custom bookshelves, and filing cabinets were stacked in the hallway while new gaming chairs and a giant television waited to be installed. "What is going on?" I demanded. Madison answered before anyone else could speak. "Ethan needs a professional space to meet future clients. You barely use this room anyway." I stared at her in disbelief. "That's my office." She shrugged. "You can work upstairs. Most of your files are digital now." Ethan didn't even look embarrassed. He simply smiled and said, "We'll make the room look much better than before." Without another word, I ordered the contractors to stop immediately. They quietly packed their tools and left, but the message was clear. They no longer saw me as the owner. They believed they had the right to redesign my house whenever they pleased. Things only became worse. Packages addressed to Ethan started arriving every day. Expensive furniture filled the guest areas. Family photographs of my parents quietly disappeared from shelves, replaced with pictures of Ethan and Madison together. Even the dining room walls changed color without anyone asking me. Every evening, they sat together making plans as if I didn't exist. Then, one night, while taking the trash outside, I overheard Ethan speaking on the phone near the patio. He laughed before saying, "Don't worry, she's too soft to fight back. Give it a little more time, and this whole place will feel like ours." Those words echoed in my mind long after he ended the call. For the first time, I stopped thinking about saving my family and started thinking about protecting myself. From that night forward, I stopped arguing. I no longer questioned the late-night parties, the expensive deliveries, or the strangers constantly walking through my front door. Instead, I watched. Every conversation, every receipt, and every careless mistake became another piece of a puzzle. I didn't yet understand. My silence seemed to encourage them. Ethan began introducing himself to visitors as the man running the house. Madison laughed whenever he said it, never correcting him once. Hearing those words inside my own home felt like a knife twisting deeper every day. A week later, another line was crossed. Margaret, our housekeeper, had worked for my family for nearly 17 years. She had cared for my parents during their hardest days and knew every corner of the estate. She wasn't just an employee, she was family. One afternoon, she politely asked Ethan to clean up the mess he had left in the kitchen after hosting another gathering. The next morning, Margaret arrived at my office in tears. Madison had fired her. Not in person, not even with a phone call. She had sent a short text message telling Margaret her services were no longer needed because the household was moving in a different direction. I was furious. I immediately called Margaret, apologized for everything, and paid her a generous severance package from my own account. She deserved respect, not humiliation. Before she left, she hugged me tightly and whispered something that stayed with me. "Claire, be careful. That man isn't planning to leave this house." Those words refused to leave my mind. A few days later, I decided to avoid constant conflict by moving into the fully equipped guest cottage at the back of the property. It had its own entrance, kitchen, and security system. Living there gave me the peace I desperately needed while keeping me close enough to watch what was happening. From the windows of that cottage, I noticed moving boxes arriving almost every week. New furniture replaced old pieces that had belonged to my parents. Ethan and Madison spent hours measuring rooms and discussing renovations. They had never asked me to approve. Then one freezing Friday evening, Madison called and insisted I join them for a special family dinner. She smiled all through the meal. I had no idea she was about to make an announcement that would change everything. Dinner felt strangely calm that evening. Madison kept smiling. Ethan poured everyone's drinks, and the conversation stayed unusually friendly. Looking back, I realized they were carefully setting the stage for what came next. Halfway through the meal, Madison placed her glass on the table and looked directly at me. "I have wonderful news," she said. "Starting this weekend, Ethan's parents are moving in with us." For a moment, I thought she was joking. She wasn't. "They sold their house yesterday," Ethan added proudly. "This place has more than enough room for everyone." I slowly put my fork down. "Did either of you forget one important detail?" I asked calmly. "This is my house." Madison rolled her eyes. "Claire, you're always making everything about ownership." "We're family." I shook my head. "Family doesn't move people into someone else's home without permission." Her expression instantly changed. "If you can't accept that," she replied coldly, "maybe you should move somewhere smaller." The room fell completely silent. I stared at my own sister, unable to believe what I had just heard. She was telling me to leave the house I had spent 16 years earning. I didn't argue. I simply stood up, thanked them for dinner, and walked back to the guest cottage. Around midnight, I realized I had left an important contract inside the main house. As I quietly approached the back patio, voices drifted through the slightly open kitchen window. Ethan was speaking. "They're almost ready to move in," he said with a laugh. Another voice came through the speakerphone. It was his mother. "And Claire?" she asked. Ethan lowered his voice. "Don't worry. She won't be a problem much longer. Once Mom and Dad are here, we'll pressure her until she leaves. If that doesn't work, we'll convince everyone she's emotionally unstable after losing her parents. Eventually, she'll give up." My heart pounded. Every act of kindness, every compromise, every moment of silence had been used against me. I quietly stepped away from the window without making a sound. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I opened my laptop, called my attorney, and made one decision. By the time Ethan's parents arrived, they wouldn't be moving into my house. They'd be walking into the biggest mistake of their lives. I barely slept that night. At 7 the next morning, I was sitting across from my attorney, Daniel Brooks, in his downtown office. He had handled every major property purchase I'd made over the last decade, and within minutes he confirmed exactly what I already believed. The estate belonged to me alone. The deed carried only my name. Madison had never paid rent, signed a lease, or contributed a single dollar toward the property. Legally, neither she nor Ethan had any ownership rights. Daniel leaned back and asked, "Do you want to start a long eviction process?" I thought about months of arguments, court hearings, and endless excuses. Then I smiled. "I have a faster idea." Within hours, Daniel contacted one of my longtime business partners, a private real estate investment company that had been searching for luxury properties in Cherry Hills Village. They had approached me before with an attractive offer, but I had never considered selling. Now everything had changed. After inspecting the estate that same afternoon, they submitted an all-cash offer well above market value. The company wanted a quick closing and agreed to purchase the property, exactly as it stood. 48 hours later, the contracts were signed. The funds were transferred. The mansion was no longer mine. More importantly, it wasn't Madison's either. The new owners immediately hired a professional property management team to take possession of the estate after the legal transfer. Daniel prepared every document required by state law and arranged for formal notices to be delivered to every unauthorized occupant living inside the house. I never told Madison. I never warned Ethan. I simply went about my days as though nothing had happened. Meanwhile, they continued decorating rooms, ordering expensive furniture, and planning a welcome dinner for Ethan's parents. They laughed about future renovations and even discussed converting my old office into a luxury entertainment room. Watching them celebrate a future they would never have almost felt unreal. Then Daniel called me. "The transfer is complete," he said. "Everything is ready. I looked through the window of the guest cottage toward the mansion where they believed they had already won. In less than 72 hours, reality was about to knock on their front door. 3 days passed without a single sign that Madison or Ethan suspected anything. They lived exactly as before, laughing in the backyard, ordering expensive decorations, and acting like permanent owners of the estate. Every evening, another delivery truck arrived with furniture, paintings, or boxes filled with household items they had purchased for a future that no longer existed. Then the legal notice arrived. A certified courier stopped at the front gate just after noon and asked for a signature. Ethan answered the door with complete confidence, signed the electronic receipt, and carried the large envelope inside without even reading the return address. A few minutes later, he opened it. His smile disappeared. The notice clearly stated that ownership of the property had officially changed and that every unauthorized occupant was required to vacate before the deadline established by the new owners. Instead of showing the letter to Madison, Ethan folded it, slipped it into a desk drawer, and convinced himself it was nothing more than a scare tactic. "No one can force family out," he muttered. That single decision became the biggest mistake of his life. The following day, Madison excitedly called Ethan's parents. "Everything is ready," she said. "Bring all your furniture this weekend. You'll love the master suite." Neither of them knew the countdown had already begun. I stayed completely silent. I continued living in the guest cottage, answering work calls, attending meetings, and pretending nothing had changed. Every time Madison saw me, she wore the confident smile of someone who believed victory was only days away. She even thanked me for finally accepting reality. I simply wished her a nice evening. Inside, I already knew exactly how this story would end. On Friday afternoon, Daniel called one last time. "The property management team, security staff, and locksmiths will arrive before sunrise tomorrow," he said. "Everything is confirmed." I thanked him and ended the call. Looking toward the mansion, I watched the lights glow through the windows one final time. By tomorrow morning, that house would belong to someone else, and the people who thought they had taken everything from me would have nowhere left to stand. Saturday morning arrived with freezing temperatures and a sky covered in gray clouds. Just after 8 o'clock, I watched from the guest cottage as 3 large moving trucks slowly entered the front gate. Ethan's parents had arrived exactly as planned, smiling proudly as they stepped out to admire what they believed would become their new home. Neighbors glanced through their windows as movers began unloading expensive furniture, family heirlooms, and dozens of sealed boxes. Ethan stood in the driveway giving instructions like he owned the estate. Madison wrapped her arm around him, proudly pointing toward the second floor where they planned for his parents to stay. Neither of them noticed the black SUVs already parked beside the front entrance. As everyone carried boxes toward the house, the front doors opened. Standing inside wasn't a welcoming family. A sharply dressed property manager stepped forward beside Daniel Brooks. Behind them stood 2 uniformed police officers, several licensed locksmiths, and a small security team waiting quietly for instructions. The smiles vanished instantly. Ethan stopped walking. Madison looked completely confused. Before anyone could speak, the property manager introduced himself. "This property is now under new ownership. We are here to take legal possession of the estate." Ethan laughed nervously. There must be some mistake. Daniel calmly handed him a folder. "There is no mistake. Ownership transferred several days ago. You received the legal notice, and the deadline has now expired." Madison turned toward Ethan. "What notice?" His face turned pale. He couldn't answer. She grabbed his arm. "What notice, Ethan?" Slowly, he admitted the truth. He had received the certified letter. He had hidden it. He believed it was only a bluff. For several long seconds, no one spoke. Then Ethan's father looked around at the moving trucks filled with everything they owned. His voice trembled. "You mean we sold our house for nothing?" Daniel answered quietly. "I'm afraid you'll need to remove your belongings immediately." At that exact moment, Madison realized everything they had built their future on had disappeared without them ever seeing it coming. Madison stood frozen, staring at Ethan as if she had never seen him before. Tears filled her eyes, but this time, no one rushed to comfort her. Ethan's parents looked completely devastated. Every piece of furniture they owned was sitting inside 3 moving trucks, yet they had nowhere to take it. "This is your fault," Wilbur shouted at Ethan. "You told us everything was settled." Ethan tried to defend himself. "I thought Claire was bluffing. I didn't think she'd actually sell the house." Daniel calmly stepped forward. "Whether you believed it or not doesn't change the legal facts." The property manager then handed each adult a copy of the possession order and explained that the estate now belonged to a private investment company. They were required to remove every personal belonging before the security team officially secured the property. Madison finally looked at me. "You sold the house without telling us." I met her eyes. "You are planning to force me out of my own home without telling me." She lowered her head. For the first time in months, she had nothing to say. The movers quietly stopped unloading and began carrying every box back into the trucks. Hours earlier, they had expected to furnish a luxury mansion. Now they were packing everything away under the watch of police, officers, and security staff. The locksmiths worked quickly, replacing every exterior lock and programming a completely new electronic access system. One by one, every old key became useless. Ethan reached into his pocket, pulled out his key, and tried the front door one last time. Nothing. The lock flashed red. Access denied. His shoulders dropped as reality finally hit him. The house he had treated like his own was never his. As the final truck prepared to leave, Madison slowly walked toward me. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Her voice was shaking. I should have listened. I looked at my sister for a long moment. Some mistakes happen because people don't know better. Others happen because they believe there will never be consequences. She was finally learning the difference. But whether forgiveness would ever come was a decision I still hadn't made. The moving trucks disappeared down the road just before sunset. The driveway that had been filled with noise all morning was finally quiet again. I stood there for a moment, not feeling victorious, but relieved. The weight I had carried for months was finally gone. Over the following weeks, the investment company began renovating the estate for its new purpose. Watching the lights come on each evening no longer filled me with sadness. That chapter of my life had officially ended. With the money from the sale, I purchased a beautiful home overlooking a quiet lake outside Denver. It wasn't as large as the mansion, but it gave me something the old house no longer could: peace. I also kept the promise I had made to myself. Margaret received a fully paid home of her own, along with enough savings to retire comfortably. Seeing her smile again meant more to me than any luxury property ever could. As for Madison, life changed quickly. Without my financial support, she and Ethan had to rent a small apartment. Within months, constant arguments replaced the confidence they once had. The relationship built on greed eventually collapsed, and Ethan quietly walked away. One afternoon, nearly a year later, Madison asked if we could meet for coffee. She looked different, humbler, older. She apologized without making excuses. "I spent so much time believing I deserved everything you built," she admitted. "I never stopped to think about what it cost you to earn it." I accepted her apology, but I also made one thing clear. Trust isn't rebuilt with words. It's rebuilt through years of consistent actions. Today, we speak from time to time, but healthy boundaries remain between us. Some lessons are too expensive to forget. Looking back, I don't regret selling the mansion. Houses can be replaced. Peace of mind cannot. If there's one lesson my story taught me, it's this: never allow guilt to convince you that kindness means surrender. Helping family is an act of love, but real love never demands ownership of what someone else sacrificed years to build. The greatest revenge was never making them suffer. It was protecting my future, walking away with dignity, and proving that no one, not even family, is entitled to the life you worked so hard to create. And that was the day I finally stopped losing my home, because I chose to stop losing myself.